Good morning, everybody. It is Saturday, January 7th, 2023. I don't know if you're still writing 2022 when you write down the year, but I've been pretty good so far. I'm joined today here on Hobby Hotline. To my right on the screen, Mr. Rookie Card himself, Victor Roman. Good morning,
Morning.
Victor.
Morning, John.
And as I always say, the man who needs no introduction, below us, only on screen only, uh, Dr. James Beckett. Welcome, Dr. Jim.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Victor.
So, Gemrate, which tracks all the grading subs, they do it by month. And then they came out with their end of the year totals. I sort of keep one eye on it just out of curiosity as someone that buys and submits graded cards. And I was a little surprised at some of the numbers that we've seen. I'm going to put up the banner here, or their stat sheet here, their stat graphic. The first one is the year totals. And you can see PSA at 7.4 million cards for the year of 2022. SGC slightly under 1 million. CSG at 635 thousand, and then Beckett at 507 thousand. I guess I'm a little surprised, guys, at the gap between one and two. Um, especially with when PSA was way behind, but yet the people are still sending in the cards. Anything stand out to you guys?
As well, yeah, I was shocked by the gap, John. It really took me back, but it's at the same time, again, the collectors vote with their dollars, right? And the hobby has spoken, I guess, is what I'm thinking of when I see this chart. Shocking as the numbers are, also the hobby, man, we like graded cards.
Yeah. Well, with graded cards too, it's not just value. It's not just trying to get more bang for your buck, right? It's to, prove authenticity, protect them,
Sure.
and whatnot. Dr. Jim, we haven't heard from you on that. Is that something you care about? You look at as someone we're looking at a bunch of graded cards behind you, obviously. Is that something you kind of keep a tab on, or not necessarily?
Well, those are part of my 507,000 BGS cards.
Are those all yours?
Back in the day, perhaps. No. Basically, when I look at that chart, there's four, and it's clear that in 2022 there are four card companies grading companies that are above. There's some others out there, but I
Yeah.
think those are the big four by far. If you're PSA, you're really pleased. Not only are you way ahead, but you finished really strong. So 2022 was a great year from PSA. They're clearly the market leader in volume and probably lots of other things. They've become the standard. SGC had a great year. Had a great year. They If you compare year over year, I think they've done great. They've made some real inroads there. CSG has done great. I think they're very pleased. They were just starting a year and a half ago, and already now they're right up there. Now BGS, I I mean maybe I'm in the dark here, but I think their numbers are higher. If you look at the footnoting that Ryan does when he does those reports, he acknowledges some lag or some difficulty in the reporting with BGS right from the beginning. So when he started doing
Yeah.
that, he was having some trouble with the BGS data. So I think the BGS data very possibly could be understated because it wasn't that long ago that they were a very clear number two. And so we'll see. We'll see. And so I hope 2023 we see BGS moving up. I don't want to. I've mentioned when I was at the summit, I don't want to see PSA going down. I want to see BGS going up. And yet they've got, SGC has a very strong base, and CSG has has been one of the best launch since BGS has been CSG of getting off, because these others that came on, they didn't get traction as much as CSG did. So hats off to all of them, and I hope that 2023 is a great year for BGS.
Yeah, and in defense of Beckett, Dr. Jim, too, as we spoke a little when we did the car mentions episode, right? They're in a little bit of a transition with some new leadership, right? So that's still in play. That's still going on. So I think it'll be interesting to see what they do in 2023. I will say SGC did well. I thought if you would have told me they would be under 1 million cards for the year, I probably would have like disagreed with you. I would have thought they would have been over 1 million cards. I know they didn't have as many as PSA. I guess that's what surprised me a little bit is that gap still, even with everything that transpired in 2022. What do you think in 2023? You think that the trend continues the same? I know, Dr. Jim, you said you hope that number goes up. You mentioned that there's some other things that maybe that number's not obviously completely accurate. For all the, I don't know how they get these exact numbers, to tell you the truth, but everyone uses them as a gauge.
They're scraping. Ryan Stasinski is a really sharp guy. He's scraping the pop reports from
Yeah.
before and after. So at the end of the month, how many cards have been added to the pop reports? And so all the pop reports are pretty accessible, at least to a master programmer like he is.
Yeah.
So it's subjective in that sense. But if there's any glitch or any lag in the reporting or any tricky stuff in the firewalls and stuff in getting to the to the pop reports, that he's got to work around it, and he just has acknowledged it was more difficult working with the Beckett site. So hopefully they're going to do better regardless. They're going to do better, and I hope all of them do better next year.
Well, you said that, but wouldn't I mean? I'll pose this to Dr. Jim and Victor, right? You want Beckett to do better, and I get that. And you said PSA too, but wouldn't PSA have to lose some of their market share for any other of the grading companies, including Beckett, to it's like a pie, right? There's only so many pieces.
No,
To get a bigger slice, someone else is going to have to take a smaller slice. Not necessarily.
that's not why Fanatics got into this. They want to put a 10x on our hobby, and probably I don't know that they're going to get into grading. I hope they don't, but I think they're going to put out cards. And Victor and I were just conversing about, the more rookie cards out there, the more grading. I think there's going to be more cards submitted to grading if the prices stay moderate in 2023, and PSA is going to get a lot of it, but so are all the others. And so Fanatics is trying to put out through Tops and everybody, all the card companies are trying to put out grade worthy cards that are worth enough and interesting enough that they need to be protected as much as they need to be graded and authenticated. And so I think there'll be more grading because Fanatics is promoting the industry to have more collectors and more cards. There need to be more collectors and more cards, not just more cards.
Yeah, here's Victor. Did you want to add anything? Because I have a comment here, but go ahead.
Go ahead. Go do the comment, and then I'll say something.
Yeah. So Dan Ryan says, if I was a grading company, I would offer one free graded card to people. Some of my hesitation was being intimidated by learning the process of submitting. Once you do it, it's easier to do it again. Kind of thoughts on that? Almost like a free sample. Hey, here, come check out if you've never graded before. This is how you do it. This is what it's like. We'll give you, It's like the free samples at the supermarket, right? On the toothpicks, except this is the grading card version of it. Dr. Beckett, when you were at your company, obviously you were Beckett Grading. Was that something that ever came up in a conference room, or like, hey, let's do?
Came up all the time. Free samples. And I
Yeah,
always said, no, free samples. What we have already is we have bulk submitters and aggregators. And I think you're doing that now. And if somebody came
yeah,
to you, if Dan came to you and said, hey, you know what, I'm thinking about grading, but I don't know how to do it. You say, Dan, I'll take care of it for you. I'll take care of it for you.
yeah,
I'll submit it in here. And don't worry, I'll fill it out. PWCC has figured out there's a big market there for they're not with PSA, but they've got deals now with all the other major grading companies to say, just send us your cards, no paperwork, we'll take care of it. You don't even have to pay. So it's not a free sample, but they've taken all the hassle out of it. And so what Dan is saying is good, except that the grading companies don't have to give it away. They have agents out there. Hopefully now all of them are going to take your money and give you back your card at some point and not go belly up. But I'm not a big free sample guy. I mean, so Dan's got other alternatives, and I hope he does jump in. And it isn't as hard, whether you do it yourself or you do it with a trusted friend. John, he should just give you his card.
Well, I know Dan. He's
I
from
know.
the Syracuse area, so he knows. He's just saying. I think throwing the topic up for discussion. If he didn't, would that be something?
Every big card show has people that will take your cards, and in fact, if you go to the Dallas Card Show, you'll get your cards back the next day because Kyle has his own grading company.
Yeah. Victor, obviously
Yeah.
you have graded cards. I mean, your thoughts on some of the, whatever you want to touch on in the comments, or even remembering your first submission, what was it overwhelming? Like, did you know,
Yeah.
what it entailed?
Let me go, because I got two things to bring up. Let me
Yeah.
go back to their first question about what's going to happen with grading in 2023. I think PSA is still going to be the overwhelming elephant in the room ahead of everybody else. If I was everybody else, I would focus on being the number 2 guy, right? So there's those other 3 companies are in close proximity to one another, and I think that would be my focus. We are going to be the number 2 guy, and what do we need to do to get there? And so a number 2 guy in the grading space is respectable. There's nothing wrong with that. Heck, even 3 and 4, there's nothing wrong with that. But that would be for me to be the other 3 companies and say, how do we surpass PSA? I don't think it's going to happen in 2023 unless something devastating happens. But to the second part of the question, I see where DR is coming from. I haven't touched a tag grading card yet. I still haven't seen one of those slabs in my hand, and I wouldn't know the first thing about submitting to them. I know submitting to PSA, it's rather simple. I know there's a lot of instructional videos on YouTube on how to submit to certain grading companies. But tag, I can see where I would be intimidated sending something to tag because I don't know the process.
Yeah, with tag, I mean, I've seen their slabs. They're pretty. They're sharp. They're really sharp looking.
Yeah.
The issue I have with tag is unless something changes that I haven't been aware of, they're not going to grade anything prior to 2004. Right. That eliminates a lot of what I would submit. Not everything. I submit stuff past that. And then they have that 1,000-point scale rather than 1 through 10. You're gonna get a grade with 1,000 would be a perfect score. And so, and like Dr. Beckett said, there's probably between 100 and 200 grading companies. We couldn't name them all if we wanted to. There's some that someone's doing in the basement of their house. It's America, free enterprise. But I think what the graph illustrates too is this is the 4 major players at the moment. I guess another question is, PSA is way ahead. What's you talked. It's a great point by you, Victor. Right? It's probably best to try to get that number two spot, which is really more obtainable than shooting. Having the higher expectation of taking over a number one. I guess my question is, when I see the discrepancy in the amount of cards, what could really hurt PSA? Would it have to be like a scandal or something terrible that makes major news that brings them down? Or I mean, what would have to happen for there to be a potentially new number one? Thoughts on that? I mean, to me, it would have to be someone would have to get arrested, and it would just be really, really black eye, something really terrible.
Yeah,
Because
scandal.
we've had issues come up. We've had issues come up and
Right.
not knock them
And
off the perch. So what
Enron,
is it? Yeah,
something to the effect of Enron. Yeah.
you know, Dr. Beckett, you were in the grading space. I mean, what? Not that you want that to happen. I'm not saying I hope to see that. I'm just saying, like hypothetically, what would cause that to be the case?
Well, no, I don't want anything bad to happen to any of the 100 or 200 grading companies out there.
Yeah,
A scandal or a black eye in the industry is not good for anybody.
Right.
So if they get enough business and they have a niche, then they can fill that niche, and I hope they'll do a good job and an honest job. But you're right, PSA is in such a strong position. It's hard to imagine that they would stumble. They've got, they have a leader in the at the top who is a hobbyist, and so he's not trying to squeeze, profits out with damaging the hobby. And so I think they're going to do well. Like I said, I just want BGS to do better.
Hey, kudos and hello to everybody in the chat, man. We got some really good
yeah,
chats happening this
yeah.
morning. Love it.
Yeah, awesome. I wanted Logan's a PSA Registry Hall of Famer. He's got an interesting
King
comment
PSA.
here. Uh,
Sure.
And Logan, a fellow hotline teammate, he says the gap year between PSA and the other grading companies should probably decrease, as PSA had that huge backlog they were dealing with, and now it's gone. So if I'm correct in reading Logan's statement, he's saying that discrepancy is because they really caught up quick. That maybe next year it won't be a 7-to-1 ratio from them into whoever will be in that number two spot in 2023. Your thoughts on that? Do you agree with Logan? You think
Well,
there's some of
I
that
think
backlog driven?
what Logan's really saying is he's going to pull back on his submissions to PSA. So they're going to drop next year.
Yeah, do you think though that's them catching up on the backlog? Just like you said, it's all pop report generated, right? All those cards hit the registry, and that's where those numbers. You think that, in other words, maybe it's not as a 7-to-1 as it looks, because once they're on sort of on the catch up on the level surface, if you will. I don't think we're arguing that they won't be number one, but will they? Will that? It won't be 7-to-1 next year, I guess.
No. We're going the wrong direction, guys. I mean, the last 6 months or 5 months, whatever, PSA is doing a million cards a month. Now, surely some of that is from the backlog. I don't deny that, but they've dramatically increased their capacity. So, do I think they're going to do 100,000 cards a month next? I mean, a million cards a month. They're going to do more than 10 million cards. So, even the 7 million, I think they're going to be noticeably higher than that. And so the other three behind them, they need to go up by 50% as well, just to stay in it with that 7-to-1. I
So
think PSA is going to have a fabulous year. They didn't hire all these guys so they could do 700,000 cards a month. They want to do 1 million cards a month.
yeah, which would
And I think they will, because they have pricing power to make deals. And I think they're in a great position.
So you're predicting 12 million cards next year for PSA.
That's the rate they're going. And
Yeah.
that's the capacity they have. And
Mhm.
so if in a month they have 800,000 cards being graded, do they have to have layoffs? Now I noticed Ryan Stasinski's in here. You might want to bring him in. He's the Gemrate guy.
Yeah, Ryan, you're more than welcome. Anyone else for that matter, but Ryan, especially if you want to join us and kind of talk about your process and even your thoughts and being right on in the trenches and doing this, we'd love to have you on and pick your brain a little bit. The link, let me put it back in the chat. Should you choose to do that, we'd love to have you join us. There it is, right there. Um, yeah, I don't know, but I mean, unless you're just assuming, but I guess it's a safe assumption that we're going to see more cards graded. How much of that's going to be on Top/Fanatics, like you said, Dr. Jim, sort of early on producing, rookie cards. Obviously, rookie class has somewhat to do with that. We've seen delays with products and whatnot. Do you think, how much of it's on them or not necessarily?
Fanatics needs to be producing collectors. Yeah, they need to be. We need to, as
Yeah.
long as we have more collectors, then we can have more cards, and there'll be more submitted grading. But PSA didn't hire and trade a whole bunch of people on both coasts now to have them sit idle, twiddle their thumbs, waiting for submissions to come in. They're gonna, again, these when private equity got into the industry, it became more professional marketing with really uh, articulating goals and where they want to go. And I'm sure that Fanatics is trying to grow the industry, and that means PSA and all of them will be a beneficiary of that.
I think something that can affect grading, whether it be for the positive or the negative, is the condition of these cards being printed. If too many of them start coming out off-centered or with damages, or I think it'll affect what gets sent in.
Yeah,
Well, we're joined, and you're right, Rick. I think you hit it on the head too.
Mhm.
We're joined by Ryan from Gemrate. Well, first off, Ryan, thank you for joining the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I appreciate being able to jump in for a second.
Yeah, a lot of comments in the chat thanking you for the service you provide and the information you provide. Kind of, if you want to like self promote here, you're more than like, what's the process like? What do you do? Accuracy, how accurate? Dr. Jim mentioned, with Beckett, it could be not exactly to the T. Just as
Yep.
the person doing it, we'll cut out the middleman here.
Yeah, no. Yeah, as Dr. Beckett stated, basically, yeah, we're collecting all the information from the pop reports. We've been doing PSA since the beginning of 21. We started doing Beckett towards the end of 21, SGC at the beginning of last year. And then once the CSG and CGC pop reports went live at the beginning of last year, we started collecting them. So they're fairly accurate. I mean, most of the companies have said there's some margin of error. Most of it's around the timing of sort of when things hit the pop report versus when they sort of log cards as being sort of graded and shipped on their end. And sort of there's some small sort of day-to-day variation there. Beckett, the biggest difference has just been, yeah, they had some internal sort of lag with when things were processed and when they hit the pop report. They did fix that significantly. It's not completely fixed in the sense that there are still certain sets that just don't sort of hit the pop report in sort of a timely fashion. But they did, there was like a 200 to 220,000 card sort of discrepancy between things that have been graded, over a course of a couple of years that did hit the pop report last year. So we did have to sort of account for that and factor it. But I would say the margin of error with Beckett is somewhere in like the 10 to 15% range versus it could have been significantly larger. So, that number we reported there, it could be, anywhere from 10 to 15% higher, but we think we're pretty close in the sense of it's at least like directionally correct, from a month to month basis. And then from an annual standpoint, we think we're probably like off by 10 to 15%. The biggest thing though, that the Beckett team would tell you is like, we don't include things that don't hit the pop report, like BCCG and BAS and all these other things, which do, occupy their time and capacity. Right. And so, there's certainly some elements of things that we don't capture. If they don't hit the pop report, we don't capture essentially.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dr.
Can I
Jim.
ask a question? This is the opposite of what Victor was saying. Not to deny what he's saying, but I think the card. So this is to Ryan. Ryan, I think what has been the boon to PSA and the Achilles heel of BGS is the opposite of what Victor is saying, is that the brand new cards are, the condition is too good. The condition is so good right out of the gate. I mean, there's a few quality control problems, but nothing compared to what it was 10 or 20 years ago. So the cards are coming out mint or gem mint. And so when that's the choice, it accentuates the fact I'd rather have a PSA 10 than a BGS 9.5. And they're both nominally gem mint. It's the reason why CSG changed their scale, because people want 10s. And 10s are so easily achievable for brand new cards, paper and chrome. So do you take that point, or
I think
that's hurt BGS?
I mean, it's definitely, look, the grading scale is a huge, topic of discussion in the hobby. And I think the quality certainly is like fluctuated. I definitely think, we focused on, that's the reason for the name of the company's Gemrate, in the sense that, we thought it was a metric that was important to sort of indicate just, how well are cards sort of being manufactured, to what degree are cards in the best quality, are the best condition available. It definitely is. It depends. I mean, that's the big sort of, factor there, is certain sets do really well. There's Topps Chrome, which can, come out of the gates and have 70, 75% gem rates. And then you have Panini cards like Prism that'll come out with 25 to 30% gem rates. And it's not, that's gem rate sort of, gem mint across any grader is still pretty low for a lot of these newer cards. So it really depends on the set, depends on the manufacturer. Quality control is a big issue still, though. So I think my actual hypothesis is that the 9.5 scale has just made it harder for pricing. So you have all the pricing tools, and I've heard this theory over the last couple of years, but the pricing tools it's not as easy to orient around a 9.5 with subgrades. It's not easy to sort of build out pricing that could factor in, different variations of, Gem Plus or, Min Gem and things like that. And so when you're in the market and you're looking at pricing tools, it's really easy to look at a PSA 9 versus a PSA 10 and understand that delta, and the delta between, the pricing tools don't orient around a spectrum of grades that have subs, essentially, or a 9.5 that's sort of non-standard these days. And so I actually think that's sort of been like one of the bigger reasons that people have not oriented or sort of moved in the direction of BGS over the years. And it is why, a company like a CSG has sort of reconsidered their grading scale.
Ryan, I got to ask you, one of our Hobby Hotline teammates who's in the chat room, and he's a PSA Registry Hall of Famer, he mentioned that 7-to-1 ratio between PSA and, at this point, SGC, he attributes it to them catching up on the backlog. As someone who's coming up with these figures, what's your take on that? Do you think that that's playing into it at all, or not necessarily?
Well, the backlog was cleared at the end of the fall. And so, PSA has been, they've had a lot of time to sort of plan ahead and think of, hey, we're going to run, through this queue. What do we do after that? And they used a lot of 2022 to sort of test out pricing levers and figure out, where is their leverage, or where is sort of the elasticity in their model. And they have a pretty good sense of that. And so I think they were smart around these specials that they launched and built up sort of mini backlogs, these mini queues, and one of the things that's not captured on that slide that you showed earlier is that's just sports cards. And they're doing a ton, all these companies. Well, at least
yeah, I do. Let me put that up. I do have the other slide too, Ryan, which is the TCG and non-sport. So you see PSA 3.7 mil. There's where SG kind of moves up at 775,000. Beckett now third in that category at 241,000. And SGC, the caboose here, at 68,000.
Yeah, and so there's a ton of volume that's going through on the trading card side, the TCG side. And so I think, that's an important factor here too. I mean, it was more than half of what Beckett graded in December. It was, I think 40% plus of it was almost 40% of what PSA is grading. So I think that's certainly a consideration. But the point is I think that the backlog's been worked through, but there are sort of, to Dr. Beckett's point earlier, these companies have been staffed up for volume, and so they're doing what they can to continue to drive that. And they want to have this idea of, inventory or sort of a queue built up, and I think they've done a good job of that. I do think there's certainly risk, the market just not being as strong as people sort of anticipated when they did staff up. And so I think that there's certainly that as a factor. It's sort of how companies are thinking about capacity. But I think there's still a little bit of room. I think PSA with their new pricing built in room to be more aggressive with specials. I think all these companies are going to sort of see how aggressive they can be there. I like what SGC did with sort of the Bowman Chrome specials. I think they're going to get creative. I think 2023 will still be a big year of like exploration. I think the biggest factor for me as somebody who observes this data, sort of like when everybody sort of is priced out as low as they can get, sort of like how do these companies differentiate? Like what is the next set of sort of features? And that's, one of the things PSA does have is that set registry, which is a big reason for sort of being. It's one of the reasons that people will grade cards with them specifically. So I think the backlog helped for sure. I think that was a big part of how PSA hit those numbers. But to Dr. Becker's point, they're still doing 1 million cards a month right now, and that backlog has been cleared now for a few months.
So I mean, Dr. Beckett's projecting. It's almost like an election. We're projecting 12 million cards for 2023. You think that's a safe bet, or do you think it's a wait and see?
I think right now, if you include the TCG numbers, I think for sure they hit that number. I think, they're bringing on grading capacity on the East Coast, which is still sort of in its infancy. They're going to expand they're going to open up an office in Japan, I think mid-year. And so they're certainly going to hit there, because I think right now at $19, they know that they have room to sort of move lower and sort of juice the numbers if they need to with specials and things like that. So I think they'll hit it. I think they had previously stated, they thought at one point they could get to 20 million cards a year. I think at one point, their internal goals were, just from listening to conversations with Nat, I think 15 million was sort of their target. And I would say like that's still like their ideal. And so I think 12 million is a safe bet for what they might do next year, with upside to like looking at like 15 million sort of being like a internal goal for them.
Ryan, I don't know if you've sliced it this way. I've not seen it aggregated, I don't think, but are half of PSA's grades and most of them in the aggregate, are half of them cards from the last 2 years?
Oh boy, I don't. I've been looking at so much data the last 2 weeks. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's high. Yes, I think actually cards from like the 2010s on are making up like 60% of cards being graded, and so and I think 40% of that is cards just from like 2020 on.
Well, my point is that's what Fanatics is going to want to get graded. The new cards. They want to drive interest in the current and future products, and so there's and that should go up. Hopefully, that'll go up.
I think the marketing that PSA is doing with their pricing is genius, because they're going to control the flow of their incoming with that. If things start getting too low and incoming cards aren't doing very well, they'll just lower the price and bring that next wave of submissions in. It's quite intelligent, actually.
Yeah, I had Nat on the show, what was it, 2 months ago, and I asked him, is he worried about like a potential backlog 2.0, and he says he believes, and he knocked on wood that they have the people and the plan in place to avoid that scenario. So we'll see. How much, I got to ask you, Ryan, how much do you have any contact with the in this case the 4 grading companies we see on that graph? Do you have much like back and forth with them, or not necessarily?
Yeah, I talk to all of them on occasion. Mostly it's sort of just to make sure that we're on the same page. Generally speaking, they're all okay with sort of how I collect the data. They think I'm doing the hobby a pretty good service, I think. And I think that's what I'm trying to do, is just bring more transparency. And I'd like to think that better data sort of is a rising tide that helps lift all boats. And so to the degree that I can deliver better data to the hobby, more people will participate and sort of, feel like they are set up for success. And then in general, everybody sort of weighs in on, the discrepancies, what they see internally. And I'm just trying to highlight again, like I'm strictly pulling from what you're making public. And so to the degree that you see differences, it's in what you're, making available. And so, some of that, and some of the companies will sort of weigh in on just, things that they would ideally love to see and things like that. But, at the end of the day, I'm sort of at the mercy of what the pop reports say. And so, it helps me stay objective and neutral. And that's sort of the goal. But I do check in, or they'll check in with me. Or if I run with a number, I want to make sure I can explain it at times. And so if there's some sort of unexpected spike, I'll try to get a little bit of, anecdotal, commentary on just why things may have happened. But it's not super frequent, but I do try to keep a pulse, or sort of a gauge, and they'll do the same. They can check it with me often too, or occasionally, I should say.
Ryan, can you share the origin story of Gemrate and what inspired you to get all this going?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was just frustrated. I just thought it was hard to navigate pop reports, and I sort of wanted something where I could have, I immediately, when I sort of came back to the hobby, I was like, why can't I just view sort of in a universal interface like data for cards? Why can't, in a way that you can do it with pricing, why can't you do it with pop reports? And so but PSA had so much momentum at the time, and there was so much concern about the backlog. I just was like, I'm going to focus on PSA to start, and just sort of go all in on sort of, making sure I understand their data infrastructure, and sort of just like how they think about pop reports. And so spent almost the first year of, what I was doing focused on PSA, but really wanted to be able to tell the full picture. I was frustrated when I was researching cards that I wanted to buy and not being able to just fully understand, hey, what was happening in 2015 when I wasn't actively in the hobby? Like, how can I sort of better understand that? And when you look at the pop reports today, they certainly don't reflect what was sort of the landscape 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So the idea was to just sort of be able to better navigate. And so I've been building out sort of this concept of the universal pop report, which we're starting to go live with some partners. You could start to see some of this content being windowed with like Card Ladder, Card Hedge, some of the pricing tools, where you can actually see within one interface the data across all the graders. And so that's sort of the goal, is to be able to have this universal pop report. The content that we're publishing is just to help bring transparency to the hobby, help people understand, where's momentum, how are players doing in the hobby. It's really just content for us at this stage. But that's sort of the origin story of Gemrate.
What's your John? I'm sorry, I don't mean to jump.
No, go ahead.
What's your take on having like a universal set registry?
It's a good question. We've been asked that a few times. So in some ways, people want to know if the data we have can help facilitate that. I just don't know the inner workings. I mean, I've spent a lot of time over the last year trying to understand the motivations behind the set registry and sort of like the technical setup, and just like, putting thought into like what it would even look like, or how could something like that come to market. I think it would be really powerful. I think, that's something that's super interesting, but I'm not well researched enough to sort of truly have a strong opinion on it. I think it would be valuable. I think anything that's through the lens of a single grader is going to do a little bit of a disservice, in the sense of, there's just such a large install base of other slabs out there, across the landscape. And so I think if you're looking at things narrowly through just one grader, it's going to only tell part of the story. So I love the idea of anything sort of capturing the broader market to the degree it can.
Thank you.
Does with your 2022 kind of wrap up for the year, as someone that obviously that's doing it, did anything stand out to you? Were you surprised by anything, Ryan?
I'm just surprised by the TCG numbers. I don't follow the sales data closely enough, but I mean, the volume that's happening on that side of the business is sort of mind blowing for me. It's the fact that it's 40 and 50% share of the cards being graded, and these are not cards that are selling at thousands of dollars, a transaction. These are cards that are selling in Gem Mint $10, $30 to $50 cards. And so I'm just fascinated by that market. I don't come from that space. And so I've been doing a lot more research on just thinking about like what's happening there. That's been the biggest surprise. I think the rest of it, we hear enough narrative across the different, channels out there that are speaking about what's happening and the trends that sort of we're observing. I think that was sort of like somewhat understood. I think the TCG side is sort of still like this, has all this strong momentum that is not really greatly understood. And I don't really know how long that's going to last. Honestly, it's like, are they sort of just 2 years behind the cycle that sports cards had? And we're going to see sort of this wave of cards, and, they're going through their own sort of, quote unquote junk slab era where, people are overgrading cards, and it's just, they have their own like backlog that's being worked through. So that was the biggest surprise to me. Everything else was sort of, I think somewhat expected in the sense of, there wasn't any sort of like really wild swings given that PSA was working through the backlog and everybody was sort of recalibrating pricing. I'm really excited for now, all things being equal, sort of where there are no huge backlogs and sort of the hobby's recalibrated and reset in a bunch of ways, just to see like what happens now. Like everybody's sort of on a level playing field. Like what happens in 2023? So 2022 is sort of a year of like, okay, let's like reset. And now I'm really excited to see what happens this year.
Steven Dermagasso asked TCG what acronym, short for trading card game. So,
Pokemon, Magic,
yeah. That would have been a question. Like, what is considered TCG? Like Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, not non-sports. So if someone sends in like Jaws or Star Wars cards, that's not.
In the one graphic we break out, we bucket it with TCG, but generally speaking, TCG, all the momentum is significantly, like overwhelmingly Pokemon. I mean, all those other genres are doing really well too, but they're a fraction of the size. It's significantly led by Pokemon at this stage, and then sometimes we'll loop or we're sort of lumped together non-sport, but for the purpose of this discussion, it's mostly Pokemon cards we're talking about.
Ryan,
go ahead. Sorry, I don't want to like hog the line here. So
we appreciate you being here.
Yeah, we do.
Sharing.
Yeah, we do. Ryan, last question from me, anyways. What does the data is the data showing you that perhaps the hobby has learned to maybe be more thoughtful on the type of cards they're submitting? Are you seeing anything like that?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, one of the things I was fascinated by is like I look at sort of some of the marquee sets as it relates to like grading activity during the sort of peak, and like I think 2019 Prism basketball, for example, had 600,000 cards that was were graded, and over half of those were base cards. And I don't know if it's exactly that, but that's sort of like roughly speaking. And then you look at like what's happened with 2020 and 2021 Prism, and you've only granted some of this was pricing related and that people couldn't afford to grade the cards or they knew they wouldn't get the cards back in a timely fashion. But you've only seen 60,000 cards graded for 2020 Prism basketball and 20,000 cards graded from 2021 Prism baskall. And a lot of those are not base, which is key. Most people have come to realize like there's not much of an angle there in the sense of it's no longer sort of available for the quick flip. There's the prices sort of have sort of made that prohibitive in the sense of retail product has gone up, wax has gotten more expensive over the years. And so anyways, I think people have just become much more like clued into the fact that base is not sustainable as sort of a
so no more 25-cent 88 Donruss Smart Grace cards.
Yeah, I hope not. I hope not. Yeah, that's certainly like I mean that everybody going in their basement and finding what they had and throwing it into the queue of
right.
Of grading queue of sort of like, hey, where do we stand? I think that's also sort of definitely pulled back significantly, which is good. I mean, at the end of the day, it was fun to sort of see a lot of momentum there of people getting excited by what they had and sort of thinking about, hey, maybe there's some money to be made here. But I think we're back to just, okay, let's there's a lot of that arbitrage is gone. What do we really want to see in slabs? And I think people are much more thoughtful about that today, for sure.
Awesome.
Dr. Jim, I was going to ask Dr. Jim if he had any more questions or.
No, I mean, Ryan, thanks for showing up here and clarifying some things. We really all believe that more information, more accurate information, more education is what's going to be helpful in growing the hobby, like we said, making the pie bigger. And so thank you for your expertise.
Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I was just purely in the chat to listen, but I appreciate having an opportunity to speak to the data. And I appreciate anybody that sort of speaks to it or, finds it interesting, because that's the goal, is just to put more information out there to let people sort of react to. At the end of the day, it's a lot of narrative in this hobby. And I think the more information we could provide to help just people sort of navigate and sort of have some, stronger opinions, the better off we all are. So anyways, thank you for featuring the data and having something of a discussion. And thanks for letting me join in for a little bit. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
All right, everyone. Have a great Saturday and the rest of your weekend.
Yeah. Happy New Year.
You too.
Well, awesome, Ryan.
That was awesome.
In the chat and
very
coming
awesome.
on and very forthright, answering some questions, where that data comes from, how he gets it, and that sort of thing. Let's go guys, to our next topic here. Um, we all saw what happened on Monday Night Football. I was watching it live as a huge football fan. Um, it was scary to see. At this point, I'm happy to say reports are he's doing much better. The breathing tube has been removed. He is speaking. He did a FaceTime live with his teammates and coaches with the Bills. So it looks like he's headed to hopefully a full recovery. But one thing, we've seen some athletes pass away recently. Pele's one of them. And then, you see a lot of those autograph cards and the likes of those kind of raising price and understandably so. But, about 3 days ago, I went on eBay just to look, and I saw this. Let me put it on the screen. And this is just a few cards. We're seeing, a draft pick, cracked ice auto, $810. Now, these are not completed. I don't know if these are going to be completed, but we're not talking about. We might be talking about a superstar guy. By all accounts, he's a great young man doing great things. Had to, set up a charity himself in 2020. But just when I see prices like that, I just kind of scratch my head. Number one, I don't know if they're accurate. Number two, I'm like, I don't understand. What do we think about? Do we think these are just people doing bids and not going to honor them, or especially now, are they assuming he maybe was not going to survive? Like, where, what's your take if when you see something like that?
Well, we lost Ryan here. He signed off, but I'm just wondering when I look at eBay and I see everything being auctioned and nothing being buy it now, as
Yeah,
opposed to the opposite, everything being buy it now at a high price and no auctions, because the true price is a lot of times discovered through auction. The buy it now, these inflated buy it nows, best offer kinds of things, they're just fishing. And so hopefully, as we said, we're about educating. If that's all you see on eBay, be very wary. It's really
yeah,
buyer beware. If he died, I'm not sure even if he died, those prices would be
yeah.
justified.
No, no,
But
I don't think so,
I'm
Doctor
happy he
Tim. And
didn't die, but that's the problem with
yeah,
autograph cards. It's better if the person dies. Well, we don't want to be rooting for that. So
yeah.
I hope in the education people can see that there's a natural flurry of cards coming out of the woodwork when somebody's in the spotlight, especially like this. And then a month later, hopefully it goes back to normal. Now the new normal, he's probably a premium player now, but
You,
not at 8.
regardless of what happens on the field, though, I mean, does his play have to
I
to
think regardless,
substantiate?
he's an American icon.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was telling my wife,
He's
he's gonna be doing interview after interview and be on all the shows and talk shows and rightfully so. I mean, you know, uh, we have never seen anything like that. Where I can't tell you the last time or if it's happened where the NFL canceled a game that had already started. They've canceled a game before it was played or moved the location, but the game, a national TV, it's Monday Night Football, a primetime battle between two, teams battling for the overall one seed. I've never, and rightfully so, the NFL did the right thing. I can make an argument they probably could have made that call maybe even a little bit sooner, but that's being a little nitpicky there. But so you think, regardless of whether he's just on the second unit or second on the depth chart, that his car people are going to kind of look for his cards and look to collect them and acquire his cards.
he's a person now. He's
Yeah,
the I did an episode yesterday about the sports deaths in 2022, and there's a bunch of them because a lot of people have died.
yeah,
So, and the 2 points I was going to make, one is that when somebody dies unexpectedly, that is interesting and really causes the card market to to wildly fluctuate for a while. And the second thing is, and it happens in the tributes that we all have done, is that you take you look at the player more closely. You have scrutiny, and when you look more closely at Damar Hamlin, he looks pretty good. He looks like a guy that's that's an amazing young man with a lot. So I haven't heard any bad stuff about him in this day when you're hearing all this bad stuff. So all of a sudden, I think he could be a corporate spokesman. He could be. There's a lot of things he could do, but he's on a first name basis with a lot of America, the football fans of America, and to come back, whether he even plays again, I don't know that he'll play again.
Yeah. Victor, your thoughts, when you see, go ahead.
My first, and I haven't checked, but I mean, are the cards selling? Is my, what are the comps saying? Is there a demand out there? And secondly, I know dealers have been beat up, or whoever posts these cards up on eBay immediately after they're getting beat up pretty hard. And that I struggle with that one only because, I know a lot of people who also, well, during the World Series, and if somebody is having a spectacular game, what do most collectors do? They're going to jump on eBay during that game and pick up some of their cards because he's having a great World Series or whatever. So that behavior has always been a part of what we do. And what happened to Dennis, unfortunate as it is there people looking for his stuff? And I guess only the comps can tell us that.
I would love to have a PGS graded, slab card of Damar Hamlin to put on my wall.
Yeah,
because I think it again, my wall is all about story, and that's a great story of how America stopped, how this football machine stopped. That's
so if I posted 5 cards on eBay yesterday or the day before, should I be crucified because I put up 5 Damar cards up for auction? I don't know.
I think if you put them up for auction, hats off to you, but I think most of them are going up with an outrageous buy it now price.
Yeah.
There's an unwritten rule in the hobby, especially on like Facebook groups and whatnot, where when an athlete passes away, whether they're retired or in the middle of their playing career, right? There's like a 1 or 2 week moratorium where you can't post cards for sale and that sort of thing. With this, obviously, and thankfully so, he didn't pass away, and he's looking to be doing better. So I think people saw sort of an opportunity to, with that unwritten rule that some people do sort of respect and follow, I thought they saw an opportunity to maybe kind of cash in on a bad situation, if you will. And Dr. Jim brings up a great point. I really never thought about it, is, whether he plays football again or not, he is going to be a household name. He's going to be, probably getting endorsements for, whether it be a medical device or, he'll probably he'll have speaking engagements, right, where he talks about his experience and how the medical professionals are key to him still being here, and thankfully so I didn't really even think of it past football, right? That this, obviously he didn't want this to happen, I'm sure, but because of its occurrence, there's going to be benefits to him, and I don't think he should apologize for that or feel bad. It could have been someone else. It just happened to be him, and thankfully he's going to be able to tell his story and not someone else telling the story. Someone in the comments mentioned about, Daryl Stingley getting paralyzed on Monday Night Football. I didn't watch that live, but I remember that as a young person. And then, unfortunately, he died young or earlier than he should as a result from that accident, that tragic thing that happened on the field. So, while it's sort of unprecedented, there's been things before. I know there was another player, maybe Dr. Jim can help you, or Victor, that had a heart attack, not so much on a hit, but on a play, and did wind up dying after, during the game. So it's, I remember the umpire, what was it, McSherry, who collapsed behind the backstop and died. So you hate to see it, but thankfully he's going to be all right. So, we're going to be talking about him for many, many, many years, and that's a good thing that we're talking about him in the present tense, and obviously not in a past one. All right, guys. Any kind of last comments on that, and then we'll kind of tackle our last subject as quick as we can. We're kind of up against it, but I think we got to cover it. It's Fanatics / Tops. I quote. I use this bailing on NFTs. This is a statement from Michael Rubin. Let me read it for those who maybe haven't seen it yet. It says, over the past year, it's become clear that NFTs are unlikely to be sustainable or profitable as a standalone business. Aside from physical collectibles, trading cards, driving 99% of the business, we believe digital products will have more value as a utility when connected to physical collectibles to create the best experience for collectors. So I'm from the jump. I'm not an NFT guy. I think we kind of all share that. But you guys can correct me if I'm old school. I got to see it, feel it, touch it, hold it, hand it to you. You hand it to me, kind of guy. So I was never in on NFTs, and then when they really kind of blew up, I'm not gonna lie, I was the old man on the porch. I just didn't understand how people could get so enamored about a digital picture, if you will. In that statement from Ruben, he mentions, a physical utility attachment. That I agree with will have more substance to it. Just your kind of thoughts. We've seen NFTs sort of crash here, much like many crypto lines. Just kind of your take on this, and top, Fanatics selling 60% of their stake in Candy Digital.
Me personally, I'm with you, John. I never really got into it. The statement that was released, I would say, again, the hobby has spoken, and that's kind of where the hobby's at right now. Not to say that it won't take off later, but this concept, this isn't the first time we've seen this type of concept, and the hobby spoke back then, and the hobby has spoken again, and that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Well, putting myself in Michael Rubin's shoes just for a minute, those are good shoes, I think. But there are two tensions of being the CEO, the boss. One is you need to experiment, you need to be trying new things, but the tension against that is you've got to focus. And so I see this as very positive. They had an experiment. It was a failed experiment for them, and they are doubling down and focusing on the mainstream of our industry. So I see that as very positive. He's not tilting at windmills. They're exiting from that, and they're going to have all their eggs in the card basket. That's good for us.
Yeah. Were you surprised, guys, real quick? Were you surprised by how popular it actually was in the onset? Like how many people kind of got on board? Because speaking for myself, I was a little shocked by that.
I felt it was hype, and that's how I felt about it and viewed it.
Yeah.
It was the next big thing, and
Yeah.
there was some hype and excitement about it, and then it fizzled out just as quick.
Yeah. And I said on my show, right? I think they need to attach utility, something of physical that you can show for real. And it sounds like if we're going to talk about NFTs, that's going to be the form they're going to take in the future anyway. And that I'm a little more on board with than just something sort of pretend. A funny comment from John Keating. He came in late. He wants to know if we could start the show over. I asked Ryan if he'd come back again. He said he's busy getting some more data. So sorry, John Keating, you're gonna have to watch it on the YouTubes. But guys, any final words? Anything you guys got upcoming down the pike that you want to sort of plug or shine a light on?
I do. I'm real excited to be starting collaborations on my YouTube channel, and my first guest is none other than the man himself, the card grandfather. That's right. That'll be releasing tomorrow.
Awesome. Dr. Jim, do you want to say it in return, like you're going to be on that, or did
I'll be appearing.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, John. Thanks for handling the switchboard. And we had a lot of comments, a lot of great comments.
Yeah, I was going to start saying good morning to everyone, but there was no way I could keep up, and that's a good problem to have. So I'll just say a general blanket thank you to everyone in the chat. Thank you to Ryan from Gemrate for joining us today. He didn't have to do that, yet he did. Very forthright, answered some questions, and that was fun. And yeah, so thank you, everybody. John Keating, go to YouTube and watch it from the beginning. And want to wish everybody well and a happy New Year. And we'll see you on Tuesday on our Hobby Hotline channel. And we'll be back here next Saturday as well for another episode. So with that, happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.